My name is Rod Williams, and at 68 years old, I never expected my own daughter would see me as nothing more than an ATM. I spent 30 years as an accountant, building a modest but comfortable retirement through honest work and careful planning. After losing my wife to cancer, I raised Amanda alone, giving her everything I could. We were close once, before Troy entered the picture. Now they stood in my living room demanding $300,000 for his gambling debts. Before I tell you how I ended up at the airport with only a suitcase while my daughter was screaming at an empty house, drop a comment telling me where you're watching from, and subscribe to hear more stories about family betrayals that taught me what truly matters in life. I live in a modest 3-bedroom house in Boston that I bought 35 years ago. Nothing fancy, but the mortgage is paid off, and it has a small yard where I used to push Amanda on a tire swing. That swing is long gone now, replaced by a garden bench where I sit most mornings with my coffee, at least I did until everything changed. Amanda was only 8 when my wife Sarah died from breast cancer. The treatments had drained our savings, but that never mattered to me. What mattered was the little girl with her mother's eyes, who needed me more than ever. I remember the night after the funeral, finding Amanda curled up in our closet, clutching one of her mother's sweaters. I sat down beside her, my back against the wall, and just held her until she fell asleep. That night, I promised myself I would give her the best life possible, no matter what it took. And it took a lot. I worked as an accountant at a mid-size firm during the day and took on freelance bookkeeping in the evenings. My parents helped when they could, but they were getting older themselves. Most nights, I'd come home exhausted, help Amanda with homework, make dinner, and then work more after she went to bed. There were many moments when I'd find myself nodding off at the kitchen table at 1 in the morning, surrounded by other people's financial statements. Amanda was a bright kid, always curious. She inherited her mother's creativity and my head for numbers, a powerful combination. In middle school, she started winning science fairs and academic competitions. I never missed a single one. I'd reschedule clients, use sick days, whatever it took to be there when she received her awards, her face lighting up when she spotted me in the audience. High school brought new challenges. Amanda was growing up, becoming more independent, dealing with the typical teenage dramas. But even during her rebellious phase, we maintained a solid foundation. She'd roll her eyes at my dad jokes but still curl up beside me on the couch for our Sunday night movie tradition. When she was 16, I finally had enough saved to take her on a proper vacation to California. We visited Disneyland, drove along the coast, and took a ridiculous number of photos. It was the first time in years I'd seen her truly carefree. College was always the goal. I started a dedicated savings account when Amanda was still in diapers, adding what I could each month. It wasn't enough for an Ivy League education, but it covered state university tuition. Amanda did her part too, earning a partial scholarship for her academic achievements. She decided to major in marketing, thriving in an environment that rewarded both creativity and strategic thinking. Those 4 years flew by, and before I knew it, I was watching her walk across the stage at graduation. At 48, I should have been thinking about my own retirement, but seeing her in that cap and gown made every sacrifice worthwhile. Amanda graduated with honors and landed a job at a marketing firm in Boston. I was relieved she stayed close to home, though I would have supported her regardless of where opportunities took her. Her early career was impressive. She quickly rose from junior copywriter to project manager within 3 years. We'd meet for dinner every Sunday, and she'd excitedly tell me about her campaigns and office politics. I'd listen, offering advice when asked, but mostly just enjoying her enthusiasm. She was building her own life while still keeping me in it, which was all I could ask for as a father. Then came the company holiday party 4 years ago. Amanda was 28 at the time, established in her career, and renting a nice apartment downtown with a roommate. She called me the morning after the event, her voice different, giddy almost. "Dad, I met someone last night," she said. That someone was Troy Mercer. According to Amanda, he was a 35-year-old entrepreneur with his own investment business. They had connected instantly at the party, talking until the venue closed. She was smitten, describing his confidence, his ambitious plans, the way he made her laugh. I was happy for her excitement, but reminded myself to reserve judgment until meeting him. 2 weeks later, Amanda brought Troy to our Sunday dinner. He arrived in a brand-new luxury German car, wearing a designer watch that probably cost more than my monthly pension. His handshake was firm, almost aggressive, and he immediately began complimenting my quaint home in a way that felt more condescending than genuine. Over dinner, Troy dominated the conversation, talking extensively about his business ventures and recent trips to Las Vegas and Miami. When I asked specific questions about his investment company, his answers were vague, peppered with buzzwords but light on substance. Amanda didn't seem to notice, gazing at him with admiration as he described the penthouse condo he was considering purchasing. "Real estate is where the real money is, Rod," he said, using my first name despite my never offering it. "Stocks are for people who don't understand how to leverage assets." I nodded politely, despite having managed portfolios professionally for decades. After they left, I sat in my living room for a long time, a nagging feeling in my gut. Something about Troy didn't add up. The watch, the car, the expensive clothes certainly projected wealth, but as an accountant, I'd learned that those who truly have money rarely feel the need to showcase it so blatantly. Over the next few months, Amanda's priorities shifted. Our Sunday dinners became less frequent as she spent more time with Troy. When we did meet, her conversations centered around the exclusive restaurants Troy took her to, the people he knew, the lifestyle he was introducing her to. The marketing projects that once excited her were now just a job, something she did between adventures with Troy. I tried to be supportive. Amanda was an adult making her own choices. If Troy made her happy, I would make an effort for her sake. But each time I saw them together, I noticed how he subtly undermined her opinions, how her vibrant personality seemed to dim in his presence, how she looked to him before speaking, as if seeking approval. Once, when Amanda excused herself to take a work call during dinner, I attempted to connect with Troy. "Amanda mentioned you might be opening a second office soon," I said. Troy glanced at his phone as he replied, "Yeah, probably. The first one's doing so well. It's the natural next step." "That's wonderful. Where is your current office located? I'd love to stop by sometime, see what Amanda's so proud of." He shifted in his seat, suddenly interested in adjusting his silverware. "We're actually in the process of moving to a better location, Corporate Tower downtown. I'll have Amanda bring you by when we're settled." That invitation never materialized. Whenever I brought it up, there was always a reason it wasn't a good time. A renovation delay, a security issue, a confidential client meeting. 10 months after they met, Troy proposed to Amanda with a diamond ring so large it looked almost comical on her slender hand. She called me immediately after accepting, her voice breathless with excitement. "Dad, can you believe it? We're thinking about a spring wedding, maybe the Riverfront Hotel. Troy says we deserve the best day ever." I congratulated her, swallowing my reservations. That night, I pulled out the family photo albums, looking at pictures of Amanda growing up, the gap-toothed smile in her kindergarten photo, her serious expression at her first piano recital, Sarah and me flanking a teenage Amanda before her first high school dance. I wondered what Sarah would say about Troy if she were still here. Would she share my concerns, or would she tell me I was being overprotective? Amanda was changing, but perhaps that was natural when falling in love. I just wished the person she was changing for seemed worthy of those changes. But what could I do? Expressing my doubts would only push her away. So I smiled and offered my congratulations, hoping that my instincts about Troy were wrong. I didn't know then how right those instincts would prove to be, or how drastically our lives would change because of the man who was about to become my son-in-law. The red flags were waving, but I chose to look away for Amanda's sake. It was a decision I would come to regret deeply in the years ahead. The wedding planning revealed new dimensions of Troy's influence over Amanda and his attitude toward money. When they first announced their engagement, I offered to help them with a down payment on a house. "That would be a solid investment in your future together," I explained over dinner one night. "Property in good neighborhoods appreciates over time." Troy laughed, swirling the expensive bourbon in his glass. "Rod, no offense, but we're not looking to start our married life in some starter home. We're thinking bigger picture." Amanda nodded in agreement. "Troy says we should enjoy this special time. We can think about buying property later." Instead of practical financial planning, they wanted a wedding at the Riverfront Hotel, Boston's most exclusive venue with panoramic views of the harbor. The cost was astronomical, more than a year of my pension. "I can contribute $15,000 toward the wedding," I told Amanda privately. It was a significant portion of my savings, but I wanted to support her. Her face fell. "Dad, the venue deposit alone is $20,000. In the end, I increased my contribution to $25,000, requiring me to dip into funds I had earmarked for home repairs. Troy's parents, who lived in California and whom I met only briefly before the ceremony, apparently covered most of the remaining costs, though something about their tight smiles during the event made me wonder if they shared my concerns about their son. The wedding was a spectacle that felt nothing like my practical, thoughtful daughter. 300 guests, many of whom Amanda barely knew. Imported flowers, a 7-tier cake. Amanda's dress alone cost more than my first car. Throughout the event, Troy paraded her around like an accessory, interrupting her conversations to pull her away to meet important business associates. During the father-daughter dance, I had a brief moment alone with Amanda. "Are you happy, sweetheart?" I asked as we moved across the floor. "Of course, Dad," she replied, but her smile didn't quite reach her eyes. "Everything is perfect." After the wedding, things changed rapidly. Sunday dinners dwindled to monthly, then quarterly occurrences. When they did happen, Troy was usually caught up with an important client or would arrive late, already having had a few drinks. Amanda would check her phone nervously when he was absent, as if anticipating his call. 3 months after the wedding, I invited them to my house for a home-cooked meal, the kind of comfort food Amanda had always loved. She arrived alone, explaining that Troy had a last-minute meeting. "He works so hard," she said, "helping me in the kitchen like old times. The investment business is very demanding." That evening felt like a glimpse of my old Amanda. We laughed about childhood memories, and she asked my advice about a work project. But when Troy called, her demeanor instantly changed. She spoke in short, nervous responses and cut our evening short to meet him at some club downtown. For Thanksgiving that year, I was invited to their new apartment, a luxury high-rise with floor-to-ceiling windows and minimalist furniture that looked uncomfortable and impractical. The meal was catered, the conversation strained. Troy spent most of the evening on his phone or talking about the celebrities who lived in their building. When I mentioned Amanda's mother, sharing a funny story about her attempt to cook a turkey early in our marriage, Troy cut me off. "Let's keep things upbeat, Rod. No one wants sad reminders on a holiday." Amanda, who had always cherished stories about her mother, stayed silent, studying her plate. At Christmas, I brought photo albums as gifts, digitally restored pictures of Amanda's childhood and her mother. Troy barely glanced at them. "We're minimalists now, Rod. Not really into clutter." The albums disappeared into a closet, never to be displayed. The following spring, Amanda called to cancel our dinner plans last minute for the 3rd time in a row. "Troy surprised me with tickets to a show," she explained, sounding both excited and apologetic. "That's the 3rd cancellation, Amanda," I said gently. "I was looking forward to seeing you." "I know, Dad, I'm sorry. Troy says I need to be more spontaneous. He thinks I'm too rigid with scheduling." That comment bothered me for days. Amanda had always been organized, a planner who found security in routines. Now her natural tendencies were being framed as flaws needing correction. When we finally did meet the following month, I noticed subtle changes in her appearance. The colorful, creative outfits she'd always favored were replaced by expensive but conservative clothes. Her lively gestures were more restrained. She even spoke differently, adopting some of Troy's phrases and opinions. "Troy thinks the stock market is just legalized gambling," she stated when I mentioned my retirement portfolio. "Does Troy have financial training?" I asked carefully. "He understands how money really works," she replied defensively. "Not just the conventional wisdom." 6 months into their marriage, they hosted a dinner party at their apartment. I was seated far from Amanda at a table of strangers while Troy held court at the head of the table. When I tried to help Amanda in the kitchen between courses, Troy intercepted me. "Amanda's got this under control. Why don't you go enjoy your wine? Isn't it past your usual bedtime anyway?" He laughed as if he'd made a joke, but the dismissal was clear. Later, I overheard him describing his latest investment opportunity to an eager listener, something about exclusive access to pre-IPO shares in a tech company. The details sounded questionable to my experienced ear, the promised returns unrealistic. When I tried to casually inquire about the company name later, Troy smoothly changed the subject. At the 1-year mark of their marriage, Amanda's calls became even less frequent. When she did call, the conversations were surface level, as if she was following a script. She stopped mentioning her work accomplishments or asking about my life. Most calls ended with requests, small at first. Could I recommend an accountant for them? Would I look over some tax documents? Did I know anyone selling a vacation property below market value? I began hearing rumors through mutual connections. A friend's son who worked in finance mentioned Troy's name with raised eyebrows at a community event. "That guy has a reputation," he said carefully. "Not the good kind." Another time, a former colleague mentioned seeing Troy at a high-stakes poker game during a business trip to Atlantic City. "Isn't that your son-in-law?" He was dropping serious cash. When I tried to gently broach these subjects with Amanda, she became instantly defensive. "People are just jealous of his success," she snapped. "Troy networks differently than your generation understands." The final incident that confirmed my growing suspicions occurred at Amanda's 30th birthday. I hosted a small gathering at my home, inviting her childhood friends and a few relatives. Troy arrived 2 hours late, clearly intoxicated, and immediately complained about the suburban location and basic food spread. When I presented Amanda with a piece of her mother's jewelry I'd been saving for this milestone, Troy interjected before she could respond. "We actually need to talk to you about liquidating some of those old family items," he said casually. "We're thinking of investing in a yacht share, and Amanda's inheritance pieces could help with the buy-in." The stunned silence from everyone present didn't seem to register with him. Amanda looked mortified but didn't contradict him. That night, after everyone left, I sat alone in my living room, feeling more distant from my daughter than ever before. The sweet, confident young woman who had built her own successful career seemed to be vanishing before my eyes, replaced by someone who echoed her husband's materialistic values and questionable ethics. I didn't know then that things would get even worse, that the boundary violations and disrespect were merely preludes to a much larger betrayal. But I felt the growing knot of worry in my stomach, the increasing certainty that Troy was not who he claimed to be, and that my daughter was caught in a situation that might ultimately break her spirit, if not her bank account. After nearly 6 months of minimal contact, I was surprised to receive a call from Amanda on a Tuesday evening. Her voice had a forced cheerfulness that immediately put me on alert. "Dad, we were thinking it would be nice to have you over for dinner this Friday. It's been too long." "That sounds wonderful," I said, genuinely pleased despite my concerns. "Should I bring anything?" "Just yourself," she replied quickly. "Troy's excited to see you too." That last part was an obvious lie, but I didn't comment on it. The prospect of reconnecting with my daughter outweighed any awkwardness with her husband. When I arrived at their luxury apartment building that Friday, the doorman gave me a strange look after I mentioned who I was visiting. "The Mercers in 1205? Good luck with that," he muttered, before catching himself and returning to a professional demeanor. The apartment looked the same at first glance. All chrome, glass, and white furniture that seemed designed to impress rather than comfort. But looking closer, I noticed subtle signs of decline. A water stain on one ceiling corner, mail piled haphazardly on a side table, a designer lamp missing from where it had stood during my last visit. Amanda greeted me with a tight hug that felt genuinely emotional. She looked thinner than I remembered, with faint shadows under her eyes despite careful makeup. "The place looks great," I lied, following social convention. "Thanks for coming, Dad. Dinner's almost ready." Troy emerged from their home office, phone in hand as usual. He offered a distracted handshake without making eye contact. "Rod, good to see you. Make yourself comfortable. I need to finish this call." He disappeared back into the office, his voice audible but not quite discernible through the closed door. Amanda busied herself in the kitchen while I sat awkwardly in the living room. The bar cart that had once displayed top-shelf liquors now held just 2 bottles, one nearly empty. The art piece they'd bragged about purchasing from a significant emerging artist was no longer hanging on the main wall. Dinner was surprisingly modest compared to previous visits, a pasta dish rather than the catered meals or expensive takeout they usually preferred. Troy drank steadily throughout the meal, refilling his glass with the remaining expensive bourbon while Amanda stuck to water. The conversation remained superficial. Amanda asked about my garden and a neighbor's new puppy, topics she'd never shown interest in before. Troy checked his phone every few minutes, occasionally stepping away to take calls in the other room. During one such absence, I noticed Amanda's shoulders relax slightly, only to tense again when he returned. "So, how's the investment business?" I eventually asked Troy directly. "Booming," he replied too quickly. "We're expanding into new markets. Very exciting opportunities on the horizon." His phone rang again, and this time his expression changed when he checked the screen. "I need to take this," he said, leaving the table abruptly. From the other room, I could hear his voice rising. "I told you I need more time." "Yes, I understand the terms. By next week, I promise." Amanda stared at her plate, pushing pasta around without eating. "Is everything okay, Amanda?" I asked quietly. "Of course," she said immediately, then paused. "Well, actually, we're having some temporary cash flow issues. Nothing serious. Just waiting for some investments to mature." Troy returned, his face flushed either from the alcohol or the phone conversation. He poured the last of the bourbon into his glass. "Sorry about that. Business never stops." After dinner, while Troy was in the bathroom, Amanda followed me to the coat closet as I prepared to leave. "Dad," she said in a low, urgent voice, "I hate to ask, but could you possibly help us out with a small loan? Just until Troy's next deal closes. $5,000 would make a huge difference right now." The request surprised me, but the desperate look in her eyes worried me more. "Of course, sweetheart. I can transfer it tomorrow." Relief flooded her face. "Thank you. We'll pay you back next month, I promise." When Troy emerged, Amanda quickly stepped away from me. I didn't mention our conversation as I said my goodbyes. The following morning, I transferred $5,000 to Amanda's personal account, not the joint one she shared with Troy. She texted a simple thank you in response. That evening, my phone rang. It was Troy, his words slightly slurred. "What the hell kind of game are you playing, old man?" "Excuse me?" I replied, genuinely confused. $5,000? Amanda said you were helping us out. That's not help, that's an insult. In the background, I could hear Amanda trying to calm him down. "That's all I can manage right now, Troy," I said evenly, though my heart was racing. "I'm retired, on a fixed income." "Yeah, right. Amanda told me about your savings. You're just being stingy, always have been." The call ended abruptly. I sat in my kitchen, hands shaking slightly. What savings was he talking about? I had my retirement accounts, of course, and the equity in my home, but those weren't liquid assets I could simply hand over, and I'd certainly never discussed specific numbers with Amanda. The encounter left me deeply unsettled. That night, I couldn't sleep, my mind racing with worry about what was really happening in my daughter's life. The next morning, I made a decision that went against my usual respect for Amanda's independence. I called Paul Johnson, a former colleague who had moved to a financial crimes unit at a major bank. "Paul, I need a favor," confidentially, I explained. "My son-in-law, Troy Mercer, claims to run an investment business. Can you discreetly check if it's legitimate?" Paul was silent for a moment. "Troy Mercer? Are you sure that's who your daughter married?" My stomach dropped. "Yes. Why?" "Rod, that name has come up in some investigations. Nothing proven yet, but there are concerns about unauthorized investment schemes, possible wire fraud. I can't share details, but I'd be very careful." After thanking Paul and swearing him to secrecy, I did something I'd never done before. I hired a private investigator, a retired police detective recommended by another former colleague. I gave him Troy's information and asked for a complete background check. 3 days later, we met in a coffee shop across town. The detective, Frank Simmons, slid a folder across the table. "Your son-in-law isn't running an investment firm, Mr. Williams. Not a legitimate one, anyway. He's been involved in several businesses that closed under suspicious circumstances. There are 2 pending lawsuits from former clients alleging fraud, though they'll likely settle quietly." "And his current business?" Frank shook his head. "It's a shell. There's an LLC registration but minimal activity. No office at the address listed, just a virtual mailbox service." "Then where does his money come from?" "They live in a luxury apartment, drive expensive cars." Frank's expression turned grim. "Your son-in-law has a gambling problem, Mr. Williams, a serious one. He frequents high-stakes poker games in Atlantic City, Boston, and Vegas. Sometimes he wins big, from what my sources tell me, but more often he loses. And he's been borrowing from some dangerous people to cover those losses." He showed me photos of Troy entering known gambling establishments, meeting with individuals identified as loan sharks, even pawning items I recognized from Amanda's apartment. "What about my daughter? Is she involved?" "No evidence of that. But she's married to him, so she's exposed to whatever consequences come his way." I thanked Frank, paid his fee, and left with the folder of evidence. The knowledge was devastating but not entirely surprising. The signs had been there all along, if only I'd been willing to see them clearly. That night, I called Amanda again. "Is Troy there?" I asked when she answered. "No, he's at a business dinner." "Why?" "Amanda, we need to talk." "About Troy's gambling." The silence on the line confirmed what I already knew. She was aware, at least partially. "I don't know what you're talking about," she finally said, her voice tight. "Sweetheart, I know about the loan sharks, the pawned items, the shell company. You're in danger, financially and maybe physically. Please, let me help you figure this out." "You had him investigated?" Her voice rose in disbelief. "How could you invade our privacy like that?" "Because I'm worried about you." The $5,000, the way Troy reacted, none of it makes sense for someone running a successful business. "You just never gave him a chance. You never wanted to see his potential," she snapped. "Everyone has setbacks. His investments will pay off soon." "Amanda, there are no investments. It's gambling, pure and simple." "I have to go," she said coldly. "Don't call me again unless you're ready to actually support us, instead of spying and judging." The line went dead. I sat in my darkened living room, the folder of evidence on the coffee table before me, wondering how things had gone so terribly wrong and what would happen next. I didn't have to wait long to find out. The doorbell rang at 9:15 on a Sunday morning, startling me from my usual routine of coffee and crossword puzzles. Through the front window, I spotted a gleaming black SUV parked in my driveway, a vehicle I immediately recognized as Troy's latest acquisition, despite their supposed financial difficulties. When I opened the door, Amanda and Troy stood side by side on my porch. Amanda was dressed in designer clothing, her hair and makeup perfectly done, but she wouldn't meet my eyes. Troy, by contrast, stared directly at me with an intensity that was almost aggressive, his hand firmly gripping my daughter's elbow. "Dad," Amanda said stiffly, "we need to talk to you about something important. Can we come in?" I stepped aside, noting how Troy immediately took control, guiding Amanda to my living room and selecting the best seat for himself, my usual armchair. Amanda perched on the edge of the sofa, her purse clutched tightly on her lap. Neither accepted my offer of coffee. "So," Troy began without preamble, leaning forward with his elbows on his knees, "we're here to discuss a family matter." "I gathered that," I replied, taking a seat across from them. "What's going on?" Troy and Amanda exchanged a look before she spoke. "Dad, we need your help with something significant." "Financial help," Troy clarified, his tone suggesting this was a foregone conclusion rather than a request. "We've run into a temporary situation with some business associates of mine." I kept my expression neutral. "What kind of situation?" Troy waved his hand dismissively. "Just a cash flow timing issue. I made some investments that are absolutely going to pay off, guaranteed returns of 20% minimum. The problem is, I need to cover some existing obligations while waiting for those returns to materialize." "Obligations to whom?" I asked directly. Troy's jaw tightened. "Business associates. Private lenders who helped finance my latest venture." "Dad," Amanda interjected, her voice taking on a rehearsed quality, "Troy has an amazing opportunity with these new investors, but we need to clear up some previous commitments first. It's just temporary." I looked between them, seeing the tension in Amanda's shoulders, the thin veneer of confidence in Troy's posture. "And how much are these commitments?" Troy straightened, adjusting his expensive watch. $300,000. The amount hung in the air between us. I stared at him, waiting for the punchline, but none came. $300,000, I repeated slowly. "And you expect me to provide this?" "You're Amanda's father," Troy said, as if that explained everything. "Family helps family." "Dad," Amanda said, finally meeting my eyes, "I know it's a lot, but you have your retirement savings, the equity in this house. Troy says it would be simple for you to access those funds." The casual way she referenced liquidating my life savings, suggested by a man who had never shown any financial responsibility, was breathtaking in its audacity. "And what happens if I provide this money?" I asked. "What guarantee do I have that it resolves the situation?" Troy leaned back, affecting a relaxed posture that didn't match the intensity in his eyes. "Once we clear these obligations, everything moves forward with the new investment group. I pay you back with interest within 6 months. Everyone wins." "These obligations," I said carefully, "they wouldn't happen to be gambling debts, would they?" Troy's expression hardened. "I told you he'd be difficult," he said to Amanda, not bothering to address me directly, always looking down on me, never giving me credit. Amanda placed her hand on his arm, a placating gesture I'd seen too many times. "Dad, please. This isn't about passing judgment. This is serious. These people Troy owes. They're not patient." "Not patient," I repeated. "You mean dangerous. Business can be cutthroat," Troy interjected smoothly. "These investors have certain expectations about repayment schedules." I looked directly at my daughter. "Amanda, are you in danger?" Before she could answer, Troy cut in. "No one's in danger if we handle this properly. But if we don't..." He let the implication hang in the air. "Are you threatening me?" I asked quietly. "Of course not," Troy said with an artificial laugh. "Just explaining the reality of the situation. 300,000 resolves everything. You have the means. Simple business decision." "Business decision," I echoed. "Is that what this is?" Amanda stood suddenly, pacing to the window and back, a nervous energy radiating from her. "Dad, I need you to understand something. These people Troy owes money to, they came to our apartment yesterday. They made it very clear what happens if they don't get paid by tomorrow. And it's not just Troy they're concerned with. I'm his wife. Our assets are joined. I'm responsible too." Her voice broke on the last sentence, and for a moment I saw genuine fear in her eyes before she composed herself. Troy stood, placing his arm around Amanda's shoulders in what appeared to be a supportive gesture but looked more like possession. "Here's the situation, Rod. I need 300,000 by noon tomorrow. Your daughter needs it. Our comfortable lifestyle, our safety, depends on it. I'm supposed to empty my retirement accounts, possibly take a loan against my house, and hand you $300,000 by tomorrow," I clarified, still struggling to process the enormity of the demand. "You're supposed to help your daughter when she needs it," Troy snapped. "Isn't that what you always claimed, that you'd do anything for her?" Amanda pulled away from Troy slightly, her expression torn between embarrassment and desperation. "Dad, I wouldn't ask if there were any other way. We've tried everything else. Have you considered going to the police?" I suggested. "If you're being threatened." "Police?" Troy laughed harshly. "That's not how this works. These aren't the kind of people you involve authorities with." I looked around my modest living room, at the home where I'd raised Amanda, where we'd built a life after her mother died. The photos on the walls, the worn but comfortable furniture, each item representing years of honest work and careful saving. And now this man stood in my house, demanding I sacrifice everything to cover his gambling debts. More disturbing was Amanda's transformation. My independent, intelligent daughter now stood beside this man, echoing his demands, looking at me not with love or even respect, but with a cold expectation that I would simply hand over my life savings without question. "I need time to think about this," I said finally. "There is no time," Amanda replied sharply, and the tone of command in her voice stunned me. "I need the money tomorrow." "And no delays," Troy added, stepping closer to me. "We'll be back tomorrow at noon. Have the money ready." I looked between them, these two people standing in my living room like collection agents rather than family. In Amanda's eyes, I searched for some recognition, some remnant of the daughter I raised, but found only a stranger looking back at me. "Okay," I said quietly. The simple response seemed to surprise them both. Troy recovered first, a triumphant smile spreading across his face. "Smart decision, Rod. I knew you'd come through. Noon tomorrow." They left as abruptly as they'd arrived, Troy already on his phone as they walked to the car. Amanda didn't look back. As I watched their expensive SUV pull away, I felt a strange calm descend. The decision forming in my mind wasn't made in anger or even hurt, but in clarity. My daughter was gone, replaced by someone who saw me as nothing more than a financial resource. The man she had married was dangerous, not just to my savings but to her future, her safety, her very self. I had promised to always protect Amanda, to give her everything she needed. Sometimes, the things we need aren't the things we want. Sometimes protection means refusing to enable destruction. As I closed my front door, I knew exactly what I had to do. After Amanda and Troy left, I stood in my silent living room, their demand echoing in my mind. $300,000 by noon tomorrow. An impossible sum to gather so quickly, even if I'd been willing to hand it over. My entire retirement planning, the equity in my home, my security in old age, all to be sacrificed for Troy's gambling debts. I sat heavily in my armchair, the one Troy had so casually appropriated minutes earlier, On the side table stood a photo of Amanda at her college graduation, her smile radiant with promise and pride. I picked it up, tracing the outline of her face through the glass. "What happened to you?" I whispered to the image. Memories flooded back. Teaching 5-year-old Amanda to ride a bike in the driveway, running alongside her until she found her balance, her delighted laughter when she realized she was pedaling on her own. 12-year-old Amanda calling me at work, breathless with excitement over winning the school science fair with her project on renewable energy. 16-year-old Amanda sobbing in my arms after her first heartbreak, allowing me to comfort her with ice cream and old movies. The young woman who had stood in my living room demanding my life savings bore little resemblance to that daughter. The Amanda I raised had been kind, considerate, ambitious in her own right. She had valued family and relationships above material possessions. She would never have treated me as an ATM, never have prioritized a husband's gambling debts over her father's well-being. I reached for my phone and called the one person I knew would give me honest advice. "Frank, it's Rod. I need to talk. Can you come over?" Frank Harrison had been my best friend since college. He had known Amanda her entire life, had been there through Sarah's illness and death, had watched Amanda grow up. If anyone could help me see this situation clearly, it was him. 30 minutes later, Frank sat across from me, his weathered face grave as I explained the morning's confrontation. "300,000? He repeated, shaking his head. "That's not a loan, Rod. That's robbery." "She's my daughter," I said weakly. "If she's really in danger—" "Listen to yourself," Frank interrupted. "If you give Troy that money, what happens next? You think he stops gambling? That he suddenly becomes financially responsible? He'll blow through it in months, maybe weeks, and be right back in debt. Except next time, you'll have nothing left to give." Deep down, I knew he was right. This wasn't about a one-time emergency. It was about enabling a destructive pattern. "What about Amanda?" I asked. "I can't just leave her to face these loan sharks." Frank leaned forward, his expression compassionate but firm. "Amanda made her choice when she married him, when she stood in your living room and demanded your savings. She's an adult. And sometimes, adults need to face the consequences of their decisions before they can change course." "You think I should refuse?" "I think giving them the money guarantees nothing improves and everything gets worse. For Amanda, for Troy, for you." We talked for nearly 2 hours, exploring options, scenarios, potential outcomes. When Frank finally left, the path forward was clear, though no less painful. I wouldn't be giving Troy and Amanda my life savings. But simply refusing wasn't enough. The desperate, manipulative people they had become wouldn't take no for an answer. They would pressure, threaten, perhaps even attempt to access my accounts themselves. The Amanda standing in my living room today was capable of things the daughter I raised would never have considered. I needed to take action, decisive and immediate. The plan formed quickly, clarity emerging from the emotional turmoil of the morning. First, I called my bank and investment company, placing security holds on all my accounts. Next, I contacted a locksmith to change the locks on my house and a security company to install basic monitoring. Then I called my travel agent, an old-fashioned luxury I maintained in the digital age. "Janet, I need a ticket to Tucson. Today, if possible." My brother Michael had retired to Arizona years ago. We spoke regularly but hadn't seen each other in person since Amanda's wedding. He had expressed concerns about Troy then, which I had politely dismissed. Now I would be showing up on his doorstep, proving his instincts correct. With the flight booked for 6:30 that evening, I moved through my house with surprising efficiency. Into a large suitcase went essential clothing, important documents, irreplaceable family photos, and a few sentimental items. I wasn't sure how long I would be gone, but I packed as if it might be permanent. The most difficult task was writing the letter to Amanda. I sat at my desk, pen in hand, trying to find words that might reach the daughter I had raised, not the stranger who had stood in my living room that morning. "Dear Amanda," I began, then paused, staring at the blank page before me. "How do you tell your child that you're disappearing because you no longer recognize them? How do you express both love and disappointment, concern and boundaries in what might be your final communication?" I wrote slowly, carefully, filling 3 pages with my thoughts, memories, hopes, and profound sadness. I explained my decision not as abandonment but as a necessary step back, allowing her to experience the natural consequences of her choices. I reminded her of the values I had tried to instill, the strength and independence I knew she possessed beneath Troy's influence. I expressed my continued love, my open door should she choose to walk a different path. When the letter was complete, I placed it in an envelope and then into a cardboard box, along with printed copies of the private investigator's findings about Troy's gambling, newspaper clippings of similar scams and their inevitable collapse, and a small album of family photos showing happier times. As a final addition, I withdrew $5,000 from my checking account, the same amount I had previously loaned them, and placed it in the box with a note. "This is all the help I'm willing to provide. Use it wisely." It was a token amount compared to their demand, but it represented a choice. They could use it to begin addressing their situation responsibly or squander it like all the rest. The decision would be theirs, as would the consequences. By 4 o'clock, everything was prepared. The box sat on my kitchen table with Amanda's name written clearly on top. The security company had installed basic monitoring. The locksmith had changed the locks and provided me with the only keys. My most important belongings were packed and ready. I stood in my living room one last time, looking at the home where I had raised my daughter, where we had grieved Sarah's death together, where we had built a life filled with love despite our loss. The thought that I might never return brought a physical pain to my chest, but I pushed through it. This wasn't about abandoning my home or my daughter, it was about refusing to participate in a destructive pattern. It was about taking a stand after years of giving way. It was about loving Amanda enough to stop enabling behavior that would ultimately destroy her. At 4:30, the taxi arrived to take me to the airport. I locked my front door, tested it once, and then walked down the path to the waiting car without looking back. As we pulled away from the curb, I felt both the heaviest weight I'd ever carried and a strange, unexpected lightness. 4 hours after Amanda and Troy had stood in my living room demanding $300,000, I was sitting in an airport terminal, boarding pass in hand, watching passengers rush to their destinations around me. My phone was turned off, my out-of-office message set, my neighbor alerted that I would be away for an indefinite period. Tomorrow at noon, Amanda and Troy would arrive at my house expecting to collect their money. They would find only a locked door, a security system, and a box containing truths they had been avoiding, and a sum that would disappoint their expectations, but might, if they were willing to see it, represent a first step toward a different future. As my flight was called and I joined the boarding line, I wondered what their reactions would be. Anger, certainly. Disbelief. Perhaps even fear, as the reality of their situation became unavoidable. But beneath those initial reactions, would there be a spark of recognition? Would Amanda, my true daughter, begin to emerge from the stranger she had become? I couldn't know the answers as I handed my boarding pass to the gate agent. I could only take the steps before me, drawing a boundary that should have been established long ago, and hope that someday Amanda would understand it was drawn from love, not abandonment. The Arizona sun streamed through the windows of my brother Michael's guest house as I sipped morning coffee on the small patio, watching desert birds flit between cacti. 6 days had passed since my abrupt departure from Boston. 6 days of silence broken only by updates from my home security system showing Amanda and Troy's repeated visits to my empty house. Michael had welcomed me without judgment, setting me up in his property's guest house and giving me space to process my decision. He'd been surprisingly unsurprised by the whole situation. "I saw the way that guy looked at you during the wedding," he'd said when I arrived. "Like you were just a wallet with legs. You did the right thing, Rod." Still, despite the peaceful surroundings and my brother's support, sleep eluded me most nights. I would lie awake, imagining Amanda's face when she discovered my absence, wondering if she was safe, if my decision had helped or harmed her situation with Troy's creditors. During the day, I maintained resolve about the boundary I had set, but nights were filled with second-guessing and worry. On the 7th day, I finally turned on my cell phone. The screen immediately lit up with notifications: 37 missed calls, 29 voicemails, 53 text messages, almost all from Amanda, with a few from Troy and various unknown numbers. I sat on the edge of the bed, phone in hand, gathering courage before listening to the first voicemail. "Dad, where are you? We're at the house. It's noon. The locks are changed. Call me immediately." Amanda's voice was tight with controlled anger. The second message, time-stamped 20 minutes later. "Dad, this isn't funny. We found your box. $5,000? Are you kidding me?" Troy's associates are expecting the full amount today. Call me back now. The third, another 30 minutes later, was Troy. You think this is clever, old man? Disappearing like this? You've put Amanda in danger. Is that what you want? Call us back, or things are going to get ugly. I continued through the messages, tracking the evolution of their reactions. Anger dominated the first day's communications. By day 2, desperation began creeping in. Dad, please, Amanda's voice cracked in a message from the second evening. I don't know what to do. These people came by the apartment again. Troy told them we're getting the money, but they're not believing him anymore. Please call me back. Day 3 brought threats of legal action, claims that I was mentally unstable, promises to report me as a missing person. Day 4 saw a shift in Amanda's messages, a new note of reflection entering her voice. I found the investigator's report in the box, she said quietly in one message, about Troy's gambling. I knew about some of it, but not the extent, not the loan sharks. He told me it was business investors, legitimate deals gone wrong. I don't know what's true anymore. By the 5th and 6th days, Amanda's messages came alone. No more communications from Troy. Her tone had changed completely. Dad, I understand why you left. I wouldn't want to see me either right now. I'm so ashamed. The things I said to you, the way I treated you, that's not me. At least, it's not who I want to be. The final message, left just hours before I turned on my phone. Dad, Troy's gone. He took what was left of our savings, my jewelry, even my car, and disappeared. His creditors are still calling, but I've told them everything. I've moved in with Sarah from work temporarily. I don't know what happens next, but I'm starting to figure things out. I miss you. I'm sorry. I love you. I sat motionless after listening to the last message, emotions washing over me in waves, relief that Amanda was safe, anger at Troy's final betrayal, sadness for my daughter's pain, and beneath it all, a cautious hope that this crisis might become the catalyst for change. After taking time to process, I texted Amanda. I'm safe. Staying with Uncle Michael in Arizona. I needed space to think. Glad you're safe with Sarah. We'll talk soon. Her response came immediately. Dad, thank God. I've been so worried. I understand why you left. I'm so sorry for everything. We arranged to speak by phone the following day, giving us both time to prepare for the conversation. When we finally connected, the emotional dam broke immediately. I don't even know where to begin apologizing, Amanda said, her voice thick with tears. The way I spoke to you, the things I demanded. I don't recognize that person. Tell me what's happening now, I said gently. Are you safe? Are Troy's creditors still harassing you? She took a deep breath. After Troy left, I went to the police with everything. The threats, the loan sharks, all of it. They connected me with a financial crimes unit. Apparently, Troy's been running similar scams with multiple people. They're building a case against him. And the debts? I've filed for legal separation, and I'm working with a lawyer on bankruptcy protection. It's going to be a financial disaster, but at least I'll have a path forward. She paused. Dad, how did I not see what was happening? How did I become that person who stood in your living room demanding your savings? It was the question I'd been asking myself for months. It didn't happen overnight, I said carefully. Troy's influence changed you gradually. He isolated you, undermined your confidence, made you dependent on his approval. Classic manipulation tactics. I keep thinking about Mom, Amanda said quietly. She would be so disappointed in me. No, I corrected firmly. She would be proud of you for finding your way back, for having the courage to face the truth and start over. That takes strength, Amanda. We talked for nearly 2 hours, beginning the long process of understanding what had happened and how to move forward. There were no easy answers, no quick fixes for the damage done to our relationship or her financial situation. But there was honesty between us for the first time in years, and that felt like solid ground upon which to build. Over the following weeks, the full extent of Troy's deception emerged. He had indeed disappeared, apparently fleeing to Mexico according to police reports. Amanda discovered multiple credit accounts opened in her name, gambling debts far beyond what they had asked me to cover, and a pattern of lies so extensive it was difficult to identify any truth in their relationship. I don't think I ever really knew him, she told me during one of our daily calls. I fell in love with a complete fiction. I remained in Arizona, giving Amanda space to navigate the immediate crisis while beginning to rebuild her independence. She moved from her friend's place to a small studio apartment, found a new job at a smaller marketing firm, and began attending support groups for partners of gambling addicts. News from Boston came through Frank, who checked on my house regularly and kept me updated on the neighborhood gossip. Troy's creditors had apparently given up looking for him at my address after a few weeks. The police confirmed they were pursuing charges against him for fraud and financial crimes. 3 months after my departure, Amanda called with unexpected news. "Dad, they've found Troy. He was arrested in Cancun trying to scam tourists with a fake investment scheme. They're extraditing him back to face charges." "How do you feel about that?" I asked carefully. "Relieved," she said after a moment. "Not happy, not vindictive, just relieved. That chapter is truly ending." The detective said, "I'll likely need to testify." "Are you prepared for that?" "I think so. It's part of taking responsibility, facing what happened. I can't just blame everything on Troy. I made choices too." Her growing self-awareness and willingness to accept responsibility gave me hope that the daughter I had raised was re-emerging from Troy's influence. Still, I knew returning to Boston would test us both. The wounds were still raw, the healing incomplete. Yet as spring turned to summer in Arizona, I found myself increasingly ready to face what waited back home. Amanda was rebuilding her life with remarkable resilience. Troy was awaiting trial, his manipulation finally exposed. And I had found a new perspective through distance and reflection. 6 months after my abrupt departure, I boarded a plane back to Boston, not knowing exactly what awaited me but feeling prepared to face it with open eyes and firm boundaries. The time for running had passed. Now came the harder work of rebuilding what had been broken between my daughter and me. The Boston summer humidity hit me like a wall as I exited Logan Airport, so different from Arizona's dry heat. My house, when the taxi pulled up to the curb, looked smaller somehow, the garden slightly overgrown despite Frank's best efforts during my absence. It felt both familiar and foreign, like a place remembered from a dream. Inside, a fine layer of dust covered the furniture, mail stacked neatly on the hall table courtesy of my neighbor. The silence was profound after months in Michael's lively household, with his grandchildren's frequent visits. I moved through the room slowly, reacquainting myself with the space that had once been the center of my world. In the kitchen, I found myself staring at the spot where the box for Amanda had sat 6 months earlier. So much had changed since that desperate day. Troy awaited trial on multiple fraud charges. Amanda had begun rebuilding her life from the financial and emotional wreckage of her marriage. And I had found unexpected peace in the Arizona desert, a perspective that only distance could provide. We had arranged to meet the following day at a neutral location, a cafe halfway between my house and Amanda's new apartment. I arrived early, securing a quiet corner table and ordering coffee with shaking hands. When she entered, I almost didn't recognize her. Gone were the expensive designer clothes and carefully manicured appearance Troy had insisted upon. Instead, Amanda wore simple jeans and a blue blouse, her hair pulled back in a casual ponytail, minimal makeup highlighting her natural features. She looked younger somehow, more like herself. She spotted me and paused, uncertainty flickering across her face before she approached the table. We both stood awkwardly, neither sure how to greet the other after everything that had happened. Finally, Amanda stepped forward and wrapped her arms around me in a tight embrace. "I missed you, Dad," she whispered against my shoulder. "I missed you too, sweetheart," I replied, my voice thick with emotion. We sat across from each other, coffee cooling between us as we navigated the delicate terrain of our new relationship. Amanda spoke first, addressing the elephant in the room. "I need to apologize properly, face to face," she said, meeting my eyes directly. "What I did, the way I treated you, the things I demanded. There's no excuse." "You were under Troy's influence," I offered. She shook her head firmly. "That's an explanation, not an excuse. I was an adult making choices. Bad ones, influenced by Troy, yes, but still my choices. I need to own that." Her accountability surprised and moved me. This wasn't the entitled woman who had stood in my living room demanding my savings. This was my daughter, finding her way back to herself. "Tell me about what's happened since we last talked," I said. Amanda detailed the past few months with remarkable candor, the bankruptcy proceedings to address the debt Troy had accumulated in their joint names, the small studio apartment she now rented in a less fashionable neighborhood, the entry-level position at a new marketing firm. A significant step down from her previous career, but one that offered stability and growth potential. It's humbling starting over at 32, she admitted, but also clarifying. I'm building from scratch, but this time on my terms, with my values. And Troy? I asked carefully. The prosecutor says he'll likely serve time. The case is strong, multiple victims, clear evidence of fraud. She twisted her coffee cup slowly. I'm cooperating fully. Part of making amends is telling the truth, even when it's painful. That takes courage, I observed. I learned it from you, she replied, meeting my eyes. Walking away when it would have been easier to give in. Setting boundaries when it hurt to do so. That box you left. It was the wake-up call I needed. We talked for hours, moving from coffee to lunch, piecing together the puzzle of how our close relationship had deteriorated so dramatically and how we might rebuild something new and stronger. I think it started before Troy, Amanda admitted. I was chasing success, status, all the external markers of achievement. Troy just accelerated what was already there, this hunger for more, bigger, better. I lost sight of what really matters. And what matters now? I asked. Integrity, self-respect, real connections. She smiled sadly. All the things you tried to teach me that I had to learn the hard way. Over the following weeks, we established a new rhythm to our relationship. Sunday dinners resumed, but now, at Amanda's small apartment where she cooked simple meals, and we talked honestly about our lives. I helped her navigate the financial aftermath of Troy's betrayal, not by writing checks but by teaching her the budgeting skills I'd used throughout my accounting career. Amanda attended therapy regularly, unpacking the patterns that had made her vulnerable to Troy's manipulation and building healthier boundaries. I joined her occasionally for family sessions where we addressed painful truths about our relationship that predated Troy's appearance in our lives. I think I was trying to fill the void Mom left with achievement and validation, Amanda acknowledged during one particularly emotional session. And when that wasn't enough, Troy offered this exciting, seemingly successful identity I could attach myself to. And I enabled it by always trying to make your life perfect, I admitted. After your mother died, I was so determined you wouldn't feel the loss that I overcompensated, solving problems instead of teaching you to face them. Slowly, painfully, we reconstructed our relationship on a foundation of honesty rather than the careful avoidance that had characterized our previous dynamic. There were difficult moments, old patterns that threatened to re-emerge, but we now had the tools and awareness to recognize and redirect them. As autumn approached, I made a decision about my future. Michael's guest house in Arizona had offered not just refuge but a lifestyle that suited my retirement years. The community, the climate, the fresh perspective all called to me more strongly than my memories in Boston. I'm thinking of selling the house, I told Amanda over dinner one evening, making the move to Arizona permanent. I watched her carefully, concerned about how she might interpret this decision. To my relief, she nodded thoughtfully. I think that would be good for you, Dad. You seem happier when you talk about life there. It's not about getting away from you, I clarified. We can visit, talk regularly. It's about finding what works for this next chapter of my life. I understand, really. She reached across the table to squeeze my hand. Maybe I could come out for Christmas this year? Meet Uncle Michael's family properly this time? The suggestion, so simple and yet so significant, brought unexpected tears to my eyes. I'd like that very much. A year after the day Amanda and Troy had stood in my living room demanding $300,000, I sat with my daughter on a bench in Boston Common, watching the leaves change color around us. So much had transformed in 12 months. The house was sold, my belongings packed for the permanent move to Arizona the following week. Amanda had received a promotion at her new firm, recognition of her hard work and rebuilt integrity. Troy had accepted a plea deal and was serving a 5-year sentence for fraud. What was the hardest part? Amanda asked suddenly. Of everything that happened? I considered the question carefully, realizing that loving you didn't mean giving you whatever you asked for. That sometimes love means saying no, even when that causes pain. She nodded slowly. For me, it was facing who I'd become. The entitlement, the selfishness, looking in the mirror and not recognizing myself. And now? A small smile lifted the corners of her mouth. Now I recognize myself again, older, wiser, definitely humbler. But myself, We sat in comfortable silence, watching a young father teaching his daughter to ride a bike along the path, memories of similar scenes from Amanda's childhood floating between us. "Sometimes I wonder what Mom would think of all this," Amanda said softly. "She'd be proud of you," I replied without hesitation. "Not because you're perfect or because you never made mistakes, but because when faced with the truth, you chose courage. You chose to rebuild rather than deny or blame. That's what character looks like." Amanda leaned her head against my shoulder, a gesture so reminiscent of her childhood that my heart constricted with love and gratitude. We had traveled a painful road together, but emerged with a relationship more authentic than the careful politeness that had preceded Troy's appearance in our lives. The greatest lesson of this difficult journey wasn't about money or manipulation or even boundaries, though all played their part. It was about the nature of true love, which seeks the highest good rather than temporary comfort. It was about the courage to stand firm when every emotional impulse pushes toward acquiescence. It was about recognizing that sometimes the greatest act of love is saying no to someone you'd give everything to. As Amanda and I walked back through the park that autumn afternoon, I felt a peace that had eluded me for years. The future held new challenges, certainly. Relationships once broken are never perfectly restored, carrying scars that remind us of past wounds, but those very scars can become sources of wisdom and compassion if we allow them to teach rather than embitter us. I would board a plane to Arizona the following week, beginning the next chapter of my life with clarity and purpose. Amanda would continue rebuilding her career and identity in Boston, stronger for having faced the consequences of her choices. The distance between us would be geographical only, the emotional connection deeper than before our painful separation. What would you have done in my situation? Would you have paid the money to protect your child from consequences, or would you have taken the harder path of allowing natural consequences to teach what words could not? Have you ever had to make a difficult choice between enabling someone you love or letting them face the results of their actions? Leave a comment below sharing your experience. And if this story resonated with you, please hit the like button. Subscribe to hear more stories about family relationships and difficult choices, and share with someone who might need to hear that sometimes the most loving response isn't the easiest one. Thank you for listening to my story, and remember that true growth often begins at our breaking points.